Okay, I think we can get started. Looks like we'll get it all done. In any case, I actually have slides today. This is a bit of an experiment. The idea is to basically give an orientation of a fairly small topic, but one which I think is interesting and amusing. And then open it up for discussion with everybody who's here to participate. Those of you who are students at Stanford, please don't put up your video. Anyone else can put the video up or not as they wish because of the requirement that you be able to attend anonymously if you're a student at the university. In any case, the topic today is intellectual property and artificial intelligence, and it's one which has interested and amused me for the last, well, I think probably 6 months. About 6 months ago, I sort of decided that we had had all sorts of things change. So let's do this. I'm going to automatically include all the standard disclaimers about this, and that's, and thank the people who participated in informing me a little bit about this. And I want to tell everybody that no artificial intelligence program participated in the preparation of this talk. And then I thought about that a bit and concluded that, to the best of our knowledge, no artificial intelligence program participated in the preparation. But somewhere, somehow out there in the space, that might not be longer true. And so sort of the conclusion I reached 6 months ago was that the singularity is almost here. Now, if you don't know about the singularity, it's probably not really transparent what's going on. But the singularity is when the massive computing power reaches a critical point and it begins to operate on its own. And in a sense, the ChatGPT and a number of the other AI programs begin to look like that might be the case. They're good enough so that in some ways, in some places, it's very, very difficult to tell whether or not they're real. So all of a sudden, our machine learning and artificial intelligence are real, and they are just another piece of the toolkit that we get to use, except that they're not. They're much more powerful in some ways. So the question really that we're trying to address today is what happens next? And as a predictor of the future, or rather a forecaster of the future, I have not really a real clue as to what's going to happen. I think this is a very significant point where things are changing rapidly, and we're going to see very major changes. Now, you may have different opinions of that, and if you do, it would be really nice to have those expressed today when this turns into an open forum. Intellectual property is a relatively recent acquisition in the space of things humans do, but we do have a fairly long-standing constitutional mandate for intellectual property in the U.S. We have two kinds of protections for intellectual property, and they are to promote the progress of science and the useful arts by securing, and the mechanism which the Constitution proposes as the right one for doing that is securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries. That is to say, a monopoly. We've evolved number of different kinds of protectable intellectual property, patents and copyrights being the primary one. Trade secrets are somewhat different because unlike the previous two, the patents and copyright, trade secrets have to do with how the information is acquired in some sense. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that's what it is. Patents are what you can do with almost anything. There are very substantial, there's a substantial set of law and examples which show that exactly how patents go together. The important thing is that patents are now first to file, which says that ongoing research and development needs to be patented and patented again on a regular basis if you're disclosing what you're doing to anybody. It's only after you have it under protection, for example, with a provisional patent, that you can really disclose much of the contents of your research or development. There are a variety of different patents. The only one that is significant in some sense, because it is how things get done, is our utility patents. Now, patents basically take a collection of information and eventually provide a preferred embodiment for it. At least this is a traditional format. And then also a number of different claims, and these claims have particular constraints on them and rights, and that needs to be unique in the world of all previous thought, which can be difficult or can be straightforward depending upon the field you're in. There are things that can't be patented. Discoveries, scientific theories, mathematical methods, aesthetic creation, rules for performing a mental act, the presentation of information, and a procedure for surgical and therapeutic treatment. You can't patent software and business methods, that is non-technical ones. Technical ones are patentable to a certain extent. Can't patent perpetual motion machines, inventions contrary to public morality, and now we have the recently acquired Alice constraints to say an abstract idea does not become eligible for a patent simply because it's being implemented on a generic computer. Copyrights are a less strong version of intellectual property. It protects ideas, does not protect ideas, concepts, systems, or methods of doing something. It protects something else. It's what's there minus all of those things, so that it is the essence or an idea or expression of the idea that is copyright, not the idea itself. So original works of authorship are those done by people. There are all sorts of rules about how collective groups can work together to provide a collective work of authorship by transferring rights. In any case, copyrights are a relatively weaker form of protection, but one which is widely used. And of course, when you write anything, a work of authorship is automatically copyright. Most copyright law stumbles on the separation of ideas and expression. And because what it protects is expression, there's a lot of argument about what constitutes expression and what constitutes ideas. And it appears, at least in the experience I've had, that is going to continue to be that way. and what we have to do in order to determine what's expression and what our ideas is go off to court and litigate it. There is a concept of fair use, and while the copyright gives everybody gives the author or the owner of the copyright the right to control access to things, there's a backdoor that allows some access under rules for something called fair use. Trade secrets are quite a different thing. These are secret and have to be maintained, so it has to confer a competitive advantage, which usually means that there needs to have been a analysis on a financial basis of why it's better to do it one way or another. The information has to be subject to reasonable efforts to keep a secret. Trade secrets are probably not something that, at least at this point, are going to be part of the issues with the artificial intelligence. The real fundamental question for today is, can AI programs create? Is intelligence and creativity unique to humans? Can artificial intelligences just create something independent of human effort? And that is really important. The question is, should an algorithm or an AI be granted legal personhood? Should it be able to apply for and acquire patents or copyrights on work that it generates? Right now, we'll see in a minute that the agencies that create and provide patents and copyright do not allow that, but it's an open question as to whether we should allow that, and that's I think going to be something that is going to be fought over aggressively in the next few years. One of the things I would like people to think about and talk about is what the implications are of allowing AI programs to have the agency of doing their own patents and so forth, and is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing for our society? You remember back to the constitutional mandate, the real purpose of copyrights and patents is not to give somebody a monopoly on a piece of intellectual property, but rather to allow that person or those persons to contribute something to the overall intellectual bank of the society as a whole. And the trade that's made is you get protection as a monopolist for a short period of time, and then you have to provide an adequate description of the invention or the work itself for use after the copyright or patent expires. And if you do allow an AI's works to be created, who would own the resulting works and inventions? Incidentally, copyright terms are often specified in terms of the author's age or years from their birth or something like of that ilk. And if AIs don't have finite lifetimes, that's an interesting question itself as to what the term of a copyright for a work of authorship by an AI. There are lots of things that we can talk about, discussing should the AI be regulated? Should intellectual property have an ownership? Who owns it? will we soon find AI in everything, doing everything, including nefarious deeds? I'm told by a couple of people in the security area that it's already doing that, that the ChatGPT stuff is already been incorporated in some malicious software. So the thing is, I'm really interested in what the impact is, and since you're the users for this technology, you probably have a better idea of what it is to do than I. It's also the thing that it always comes down to when people first encountered thinking about this is the question is are humans important to the creative process? Or if you can't detect whether the output of the creative process was created by a machine or a human, doesn't make any difference. I think that's an important point when you're trying to argue that maybe the AIs should be allowed to do their thing without the interference or help of a human being. Right now, the situation is exactly what you might expect for things. The Patent Office does not accept inventions by non-humans. The reasoning for that is severalfold. One of them being that since non-humans can't sign the application, the Patent Office can't accept it. And then the Copyright Office does not support AI authors. And just recently, they said that that was the case, and several other organizations who do copyright outside of the U.S. have also been rejecting things. A couple of countries have allowed for copywriting of materials written by AIs under the AI's identification, but that is not the common case at this point. And I think that's the end of the slides. So what I'd like to do now is to move to an open forum, raise your hand or whatever, or just step in if there's a break and ask questions, make comments. Tell me a little bit about what you think the situation ought to be. I have thought about this several times. I think the implications of the technology being used and being somewhat autonomous are interesting and perhaps somewhat disturbing. If you adopt that position and note that the AI software is similar to many other different kinds of software, and it looks to me like the AI model, if it becomes propagating, then it becomes fairly simple to have automatic thises and that's, which are not necessarily based on our current AI models, but on much simpler or much more complicated programs, which also have the same agency, and it is going to change the relationship between what is possible in the intellectual property arena and who makes money on things. In any case, I'm going to drop the slides down now and open the thing. Please remember to turn on your microphone if you're interested in saying something. Okay, here we go.
So there is a question: who would profit if AI creates some invention? The creator of AI or guy who actually asked that AI to do some invention, or it's maybe a poem, for example, scientific, technology invention or whatever.
Well, I can't answer that. What do you think would make sense?
I don't know. It's just new for me, at least for today.
I see. Okay, well, think about it as we go on, and you come back in if you come up with a good answer. I think that's going to be one of the more difficult ones, particularly since if you give agency to the AIs and they can do work, then it's possible that the slavery or anti-slavery things come and get brought in because you're doing servile work without pay for somebody else, and I'm not certain that that applies, but it certainly is an interesting thought, I thought.
Right, and we need to solve that as fast as possible because otherwise it would be solved in courts.
Yes, I think so, and I think, by the way, that this is going to be dominant in the next. I think we'll have in every AI. This is and that's everywhere in the next 6 to 10 months to a year, and already you see it showing up in various places, which is a little surprising. If you'll remember when Benji Menser spoke, he was talking about how the patching of images together into a seamless whole is now being done with the use of AI, and you can't disassemble it in order to tell whether or not it's faked or not.
I think I was thinking about this question as well. And something that came up was that there are currently some licensing work because at present, artificial intelligence is a technology. So it is still not at the level of consciousness, and imitation of consciousness does not mean that machine has it. For example, the Turing test, it states that if machine can imitate human, therefore it is capable of human thinking. But it is important to remember that there is a difference. So syntax is also not the same as semantics, as John Searle pointed as well. And I agree with this opinion. But at the present, since we view it more as a technology, or at least I do, there are more of a licensing work going on, as well as currently you have to pay for certain types of AI, and then you can own the work. Otherwise, the work belongs to the creator or to the company. So there are also some decentralized networks that include AI. So that's a little more complicated, but I think it would really depend on the type of AI, what it does, and how we use this work, because there are open licenses and for public use and not, and private. So I think it would maybe depend what is it and what the creator decides.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a reasonable position, but you're basically trying to set it up in such a way that the current ownership situation is as undisturbed as possible, in the sense that you want to sort of maintain licensing and ownership by companies and that sort of thing, and that may not be the right thing to do. I think. I mean, I'm just curious about exactly what other options there might be.
Okay, so I understand your concern, but currently also the companies create AI, so it's more a private thing. So it definitely would be good to have some government intervention, I think, at least partially, because also there may be difference because I'm in Europe, so we have a little different legislation, as well as European Commission currently working on the AI policies. So I'm not sure 100% what the situation in US, but I think that it would be good, the process of collaboration, because it is a very powerful technology. It also involves a lot of data. So how this also data collected and what it gives you as a result, I think it should be at least thought together. We should maybe set a common goal, but at the present, since the technology is made by private sector, I think at now there is a short-term licensing, but if we look in the future, of course, maybe as technology progresses, it may change, and we have to be aware of these changes and provide new also changes in legislation or our ideas. How do we perceive the technology, particular AI as well?
Yes. Okay, great. Anybody else there?
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. The question was, so I'll reference a number of cases, specifically the case in which that I think it was a macaque took a picture of itself, selfie, and then the owners of the camera who had let the monkey get a handle of it and then take a picture of it. There you go. That's it. Yeah. Try to accept copyright it over the images that the primate took of itself, and then PETA sued the people who tried to for violation of this primate's copyrights, and it was based on actually court findings that if it's not, I mean, yes, the Copyright Office rejected the proposition, but at the same time, the courts rejected the proposition a non-human of any sort can exert any kind of copyright. So that's in the United States, at least, the jurisprudence is pretty unequivocal about that. There's been no successful challenges to that formulation. But the only other way in which the idea of ownership has been addressed, Mary Rosenberger, who is the lead counsel for the Authors Guild of the United States, in comments to the Copyright Office, suggested that perhaps two solutions could be found, that whatever analogous to the solutions found in the monkey case, which were that if the photographer set the f-stop, or the IS, whatever, if the photographer so much as intervene in any way, then by extension, it is the photographer's copyright. So that's what part of the rationale is why the courts found in favor of the owners of the camera who had let that in. So I think that answers the question as to whether copyright in the United States, jurisprudence is pretty unequivocal about that. Mary suggested that any work of any copy, any work, novel work, over which there is no overfitting or plagiarizing or anything like that, as long as a human being had some hand in it, even if it was transfer learning, fine tuning, even if the model showed up, pre-trained and whatever, that constitutes copyrights for a human, and that's the entity that gets the copyrights. So Paul Reinitz at Getty, who is the head of advocacy, has been sitting. He's also a colleague of mine who I've sat on panels with. His determination is and we debate because his determination is that now the question is how much input is the metric by which courts should award. If not, then it either the thing was a violation, the creation is a violation, or goes into the public domain. So now a lot of policymakers are trying to find where's the magic spot where you got just right human intervention for it to constitute human creation, and that's a relative. People who are copyright owners are going to want more input from a human before. Others are going to want a lot less, like I put a dot somewhere and that's enough. So I think that's from my understanding, and I would encourage. I'm going to put in the link on Mary Rosenberger's comments to the copywriter illuminating in this regard. And she would like to have licensing on any AI. So kind of like the HIA, like the Film Recording Act, the HRA, where they passed on all manufacturers of digital audio tape recorders had to pay a licensing fee before the object got in the market. So the copywriters are advocating for that. Anybody who makes an AI tech needs to pay a license
Well,
to a conglomerate. Anybody.
how do you deal with the fact that everything that's written, every work of authorship by a human being, is automatically copyright?
Correct. And it's sort of like you invent a technology that could potentially, in the process of its operation, violate copyrights. Therefore, if you invented such a technology, you have to pay a license to the original, to whatever content you wish to use. The musicians, the authors, Jack Valenti must be rising from the dead. He's so happy. At least, he was the former lead counsel for the the movie industry, right? So he's the guy who's famously said something so egregious in front of Congress. It's not even worth commenting. If you want to know, you can look it up. So that's my comment on that. I think it's just not going to happen. The jurisprudence is pretty solid.
Yeah. So do you think that the effigy of the AIs will get impacted at all by the rush to having rules about how the intellectual property is managed?
I think what's going to happen, it's going to be a chilling effect. I think unless the tech industry doesn't get, because I'll tell you, Getty is in Europe. My Paul from Getty is in Europe advocating for this kind of governance, and they're doing it in the United States. And I don't see tech companies really doing anything. Well, they're doing something, but they're not in the room really fighting, in my opinion.
And so would you advocate for tech companies advocating for a much looser or a much tighter control on the?
I think there's going to have to be a middle ground. I think Mary Rottenberger's comments on, let's say, the amanuensis thesis, that if we start treating it like amanuensis, anything that it makes is a work for hire in it. And so whether it's a patent, so anything an AI makes becomes a work for hire, and it's the amanuensis. It just helped you. And in that way, I think it becomes less of a chilling effect. People are more willing to say, well, okay, I had an AI help, as opposed to, well, the AI did most of it, and then nobody gets to benefit from the monopoly, which was supposed to be an incentive. I think that covers it. Yeah.
Recently, a number of papers have been submitted to journals where the AI program was left as a co-author. And
right.
The journals rejected them because they say only human authors.
Right. I think it's going to be a normative, like different fields, publications will have different norms that evolve. But as a matter of law, the boundaries are pretty well defined.
Mm-hmm. And you believe that the boundaries of law will prevail?
I would think the argument would have to be a common goods argument. I think I've spoken to other intellectual property attorneys who suggest that maybe a Nash equilibrium or Nash equilibrium or those kinds of economic studies of markets suggest that actually a looser intellectual property regime is better for the market as a whole. And I think that argument can be made for AI, since it's the potential to mass produce high quality functional tools. So, and the market will benefit. So it inoculates against the Chicago school jurists, right? And then also gives some support to the incentivize and progress of the useful arts camp.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
So thinking about the constitutional mandate is that there's a bargain here, that we will give you a monopoly if you submit to the public domain eventually, right? So we'll give you a limited time. So that's essentially incentivizing authors and patent inventors to be able to put their things out. So that incentive is missing from machines. Machines don't need incentives to be able to create. And in fact, machines can spit out millions and billions of things, whereas humans can't do even a fraction of that. So my thought is that constitutionally, we don't have a way, like, we don't need to incentivize machines to blanket the world with copyrightable things and patentable things. That incentive isn't needed. So as my personal example, I've created a machine to spit out and copyright 417 billion melodies. Once they're written to a fixed tangible medium, those are now copyrighted, right, under the Berne Convention. So are all 417 billion of my melodies copyrightable? I set the parameters, and that's the previous speaker just talked about the f-stop, right? So I created the f-stop. I said, here are the parameters of, I want do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And then I said, and repeat this many notes, and then it spit out 417 billion melodies. Have I now closed off every possible melody that's ever been and ever can be? If any, can I sue now people for every possible melody? I think the answer to that clearly is no, because my machine didn't need the incentive, the constitutional incentive, to be able to respond, to be able to, get a monopoly of life of the author plus 70 years, or for a corporate, it's 120 years, if I'm remembering correctly, 95 or 120 years.
99.
So yeah, so none of those incentives is necessary for the machine. So I would argue that the only real good answer on the output is no copyright, because machines don't need incentives. On the input, on what the machines like the LLMs, the large language models like GPT and BART, et cetera, what they input, if you look at the way the technology is done, they're ingesting the ideas and not the expressions of those ideas. So they're pulling in the ideas of what is a good thing, what is a bad thing, what is a car, what is a truck, and it puts all those things in vector space in a mathematical model, and it jettisons the expressions of those ideas. It merely keeps those ideas themselves and then outputs new expressions of those ideas. So to the previous person's discussion about maybe we need to put a tax on all AI systems, the AI system ingests grapes of wrath, but it doesn't keep grapes of wrath in the system. Instead, it just takes the ideas from grapes of wrath and then jettisons that expression, and then maps those ideas with all the thousands or millions of other books, and then the expression doesn't matter. The ideas are the only things that matter. So I would say that that really there's really no reason to have a home recording act, because if you look at the Google Scholar case, that's the Authors Guild versus Google in the Second Circuit, they said that it's fair use because you can it's for a transformative use to be able to say I Google am indexing all of these books, and I Google can reproduce 3 or 4 pages of verbatim text from those books, and that is fair use as transformative. Compare that with the large language models that again aren't even taking those expressions of those books, not even taking 3 pages of those expressions, but rather it's just taking the ideas of those books and then reconstituting ideas, not expressions, but reconstituting ideas there. So if fair use under Google Books, then wouldn't it also be fair use under large language models? Yeah,
the Google Books has been argued to be invasive and non-conforming to copyright models. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's right. It's interesting that you see this as a separation of idea from expression in terms of building the knowledge base on which all of these things are based. And it's very interesting.
I think that it's because if you look at the models, the large language models, there is not an expression to be found in those models. There's merely ideas. It takes in vector space, it takes the idea of Bob Dylanism, right? It takes the idea of of any human author, and it doesn't have any Bob Dylan's lyrics in the system. It merely has the idea of what Bob Dylan, his use of language, right? So anyway, there is not an expression to be found.
Okay, that's great. So
maybe I should also introduce myself a little. I'm from Poland, University of Białystok, close to Warsaw. So yeah, just to make it clear, introduce myself. So a couple of points that I mentioned here. I think that reference to ideas and expressions may also have a little deeper connection to syntax and semantics of artificial intelligence. So that artificial intelligence, at least as currently seen, it's shuffling this, shuffling the symbols physical symbols, but it doesn't have mental content attached to it. So when I say I like ice cream, so we as people have mental content attached. What is it? Ice cream. So I think what it also implies here is that the machine is not kind of have this deeper understanding, but it is shuffling the information, the data. And I think also maybe regarding the authorship point, I will start from the end from because I made a couple of notes. So maybe it's not authorship that we can grant, but a mention. So we can raise an awareness that this technology has participated in creation of this and that. So because authorship implies a moral status, and currently only humans have moral status. Of course, there were propositions in European Commission of electronical persons or electronic persons, but it was kept just as an idea. So it didn't come into life as an actual concept. So maybe not yet, and maybe not in very close future. But as mentioned, the idea of moral status, which also I think you called as legal personhood, I assume it's related. So there is a deeper ontological question. So what is machine and how do we see it? Do we see it as a like conscious or unconscious? Because we have animals as well. We have children whose creation, for example, is kind of under parent guidance, or animals, when they create, it kind of legally belongs to the owner of the animal. So where do we position artificial intelligence, and whether we should position it on the scale of living or spectrum? Because we also have to understand the living beings, because non-living come into play as well. So it's important to think it through, I guess. And yes, regarding the free market that mentioned, I think it's he mentioned exactly the looser control. And I guess this looser control is related to free market, but there is an kind of possible challenge, or maybe even an issue, that free market can lead to autocratic behavior, in the sense that big companies own it. Like currently we have we have a free market economy, mostly in almost everywhere. And the thing is that now the big corporations control our, for example, media, like Facebook, who is Meta. So they own many things, as well as other companies that own. So of course, I find that governmental intervention is necessary, but not like that they control everything, but a certain degree of mix of support and just guidance. How do we guide the ethically ethical development of artificial intelligence, which also matters in these questions, because ethics is can be both as well-being for human and understanding how do we grant authorship, how do we make it right.
And,
I
you think it's possible to write a description of what an ethical person and a ethical AI could actually be?
So there is, of course, this is a very big question. How do we express our moral things? How do we can compute it? We can't explain the moral to each other, to humans. How we explain it to machine, into the language of machine? So currently there are ethical ideas what AI could look like, which is kind of respectful in a sense to privacy. It also can be that collection of data, the equality, so it's not biased, which is very important. It's a very big topic right now in artificial intelligence, avoidance of bias. And because when artificial intelligence is biased, it reproduces inequality. When it's put in the world, it can end up very not well. So there is big fear that artificial intelligence, not even fear, but idea that artificial intelligence may harm us, not because it's too smart and will outsmart us, but because it's not smart enough. So, and it will reinforce these issues that we have. So question of ethics of artificial intelligence is questions about us. So I think in all of these questions is how do we actually perceive artificial intelligence and how do we position it with ourselves? Because we make the law and this is a technology. So what place does it have? Of course, we can't really answer this all now, and maybe not many minds come together and they still can't solve it, but it's something to look toward to. And yeah, so the question coming back to it, so what is ethical AI could be? Well, we can now maybe realize the main points, but exact ethical ideas, I'm not sure even if we can express them, but we can understand some what is good, more or less, what is beneficial, what is non-beneficial. So this is what we can also understand. But also another point, who does it benefit? So I think it's all for now. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It's interesting that you chose that particular point of view. I think you seem to have thought through this whole issue rather nicely, and you seem to be fairly certain that some of these things can be done, and yet those of us who've tried feel it's really hard. So I think that what you're saying is that this is a goal, not a place where we are at the moment. Yeah,
definitely there is something to work toward to. It is a new technology. Well, it is not like so new that artificial intelligence is something just came up. It's been very long, actually quite long in history, or even if not artificial intelligence as we have today, the idea of artificial intelligence been for long. And what I mean that indeed we have a goal to work, because it's like when first internet came, it was a big change. So how did internet evolve? What was done for this? So I see it kind of shift similar to the internet, but it still has its own things. And yeah, and thank you for pointing out. I'm actually writing my thesis on this topic, and I study philosophy and ethics. So maybe this is where my perspective coming from as well.
Yes. All right. Do we have any more comments out there?
I would like to warn that any kind of attempt to bind the person to legal, moral, or ethical issues is very dangerous, because you and me may have a different view on what is moral, what is legal, what is ethical. That's first. The second one, I just want to remind that there is an old test proposed about consciousness from Martin Minsky, that the artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence if you can't differentiate it from another human. It's, don't remember exact wording, but it's kind of. And finally, I would like to mention that there are two levels of that, and it seems like we slip into a person and a human. But currently, in many development in technology assumes artificial intelligence and much less than that. Some tool which could help to produce inventions or development or whatever. So for that reason, it's very interesting who would own the result, because one company may produce a tool, even actually more companies may produce a tool. And another company may just use that tool to create invention or some kind of work which may be copyrighted or whatever. Who owns this? That's the issue, because if we default that tool creator copyrights, have a right on copyright, it's a path to hell, basically, in my mind. Otherwise, it's actually where tool creators spent very big efforts to make that working. So some thin line need to be put here.
Mhm.
Maybe I just think about that. If there is no explicit legal agreement between tool creator and user of that tool, when by default the right of work belongs to user of that tool.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, I'm talking about what is usually assumed right now, what is artificial intelligence. It's not about human or whatever. We close to that, but we still do not jump to this. I mean, to have human in a computer or in somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, please go ahead.
Do you have a comment here?
Yeah, so why we were talking about this, because it was actually a question, how do we, whether the artificial intelligence should be given a legal personhood and how do we perceive it. So this is a reason why I opened the discussion. But I will start from the beginning. So we don't know what is moral for everyone. Therefore, we should not be concerned with this. I find it quite, I don't know how to explain, but we should not give up on the morality and ethics if we have a differences. It's like it is commonly perceived that murder, for example, is not good. It is unethical, so to say, in the softest sense. So it is something common. Most of us understand it. And we just should look toward common grounds. Of course, it may not be so simple. Also, artificial intelligence technology is not fully international. So each country has their own, but international technology should have also aim for the international standards, which is very important in the development as well as copyright and in terms of law. So the second about the argument of Minsky, so whether if machine can imitate consciousness, thus it has consciousness. It is the Turing test as well, what states it. And as I mentioned before, imitation is not recreation. So imitation of consciousness does not mean you have consciousness just because you can imitate it very well.
Sorry for interrupting you here, but you can say that it is imitation. If you cannot detect that, you cannot say.
Okay, but what to say? It's like I can produce such a beautiful artificial flower, you won't be able even to distinguish it's real. Does it make it real?
You don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know as a customer, but the creator knows. So the fact of ontology of its creation is known. It is artificial. It's not real. But
it may be many reasons for creator to hide that or whatever. And it's also arise an issue if women create a child. What is it?
This is a different question, very different. I understand for you it may look similar or same, but it is very different. Women don't give birth to artificial children. This is a living human being who possess a full moral status, like you and me, I guess. So this is totally another topic. But let's come back to the artificial intelligence and the example of flower. So indeed, they may hide it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is artificial.
Okay, let's assume that the creator of artificial flower died. You don't know. Creator died. He don't live anymore.
This is already some sort of fairy tale or a story, or a narrative.
Okay, you have a flower. You cannot ask creator because creator died.
So this is already certain, I don't know, a puzzle, but the idea of creation of artificial thing does not make it real. Whether author died, whether it was hidden, whether it was sent to space, I don't know. The thing, if it's artificial, it doesn't make it real. I hope it's quite clear. The third point is that we, as mentioned at the beginning, that we moved toward the other idea of moral status of artificial intelligence. But indeed, it's important to understand now it is just a technology. It's complicated, powerful technology. So it is important to understand how we deal with it now, but it's also important to keep in mind the possible changes. So certain perspective to the future should be kept, how it may change, but we need to focus at present, because going too much into what it could be, even we never may ever reach singularity. It may not ever happen. There are ideas like that. So, and it is quite prevailing. So we have to focus issues we have now, like bias in artificial intelligence, the ownership, authorship, and the big tech. So, which is again the question of ownership and authorship. Because if it's such powerful technology owned by single, like 1-2 companies, it's such a big issue that because such technology will be owned by a single person who can basically decide and reinforce wherever they desire, which is, I think, important to regulate. Thank you.
I think that's definitely an issue here, and that's one of the big questions that we have, is that we need to somehow arrange that this technology is widely available to everybody without much concern about their economic status and relationship with other entities. And or do we just allow the large monolithic companies to battle over the intellects of the populace which interact with these AIs? I don't know. It's a difficult question. It's exactly what we're trying to figure out right now. And the thing is, I don't think we have a whole lot of time. I think that this is a powerful enough technology that we'll see it moving rather rapidly into almost everything we do. And I don't know whether we're too late to actually build a control system for it or not. It's hard to
So
tell.
Dennis, I have a response to the points, which are, I think the second paper I posted on there I think that will be right up your alley when you mentioned about the vectorization. The findings of the courts when they found was the transformation between the content. So in the courts, the only people really making a stink really are intellectual property owners, existing intellectual property owners that are assessing, really like staying up at night and hand-wringing that someone used in their training corpus or their transfer learning corpus copyrighted goods, right? And by a function of their process made copies and used those as inspiration for generating the model. And so the model is, in a sense, has the vibe, right? Kind of like Billy Joel had the vibe of Bob Dylan when he sang Piano Man, because it sounds a lot like Tambourine Man, right? So it's almost as if the human influence in transfer learning, but the copyright owners would be trying to prevent that because there was an actual objective copying made. But the courts found that the transformation to a data matrix, like a vectorization of that, is enough of a transformation for it to be transformative, and therefore fair use is all good.
So how do you define transformative? Just because that's
it's always been it's always kind of a slippery slope between transformative work and derivative work. Derivative work is like the original enough, and this can be subjective, and it depends on the type of content we're using. If it's a book, a story versus a movie versus a song, right? Different types. Is the tonal structure the same? Are the sound progressions, are the note progressions the same? For how many bars? And you have musicologists who will go through an entire piece just to find enough overlap, enough overfit to blame whoever made the new song either through AI or on their own. to claim copyright violation. So it varies on content, on the type of media we're talking about, like what is derivative or versus transformative. But in the case of data, when content becomes a data form, it is transformed. The courts did not extrapolate to other media forms like film or music, but it is a logical extension of the reasoning that you could indeed do that. And that really puts a brakes on copyright owners' arguments against, against anyone using AI, and makes the amanuensis thesis a lot more palatable, right? Otherwise, they'll just sort of, just kind of never get anywhere. It will be an argument that doesn't go anywhere. But to answer the question about moral rights, I'm assuming you're referencing Kant. That's the last time I heard it in the legal philosophy, and it was the moral rights, and those are continental ideas, at least in the US and in the UK. That's a different story, right? And that's its applicability to an extension of the self, right? So in the United States, the self ends where the self ends, right? And privacy laws may extend that to health, like HIPAA or whatever. But so that the moral rights argument in the United States and might be a hard sell. I think you're right, to much easier sell in the UK, in the continent.
Well, European copyright law has a concept from France of moral right, which is a right that cannot be sold or taken away. Correct,
and it's and it goes beyond. It goes into personhood. That anything that a person, like your visage, the things that you make, it's like you put your soul into it. I mean, they took that metaphor literally, right? So it's extension of the person. But I don't think, if you're going to think about it internationally, we'll run into the same things, kinds of conundrums that we get into in privacy, right? The GDPR provides the kinds of protections for European citizenship data that we don't afford here for American citizens. So we're in this weird space. We're like, well, are we going to become divergent in our international treaty obligations to observe copyright, right? If we can't agree on whether the AI, even by using an original work to learn to make its own original works, has in fact violated the moral rights of an existing author or person or photographer. So that's a more, but a legal person is a different definition than a moral person. And we're talking about two different things. It seems like if we're going to start thinking about AI as a moral person, we have to do that first in an argument that in a way that we can all get on board, and then try to sell that to the policymakers who are just thinking of legal persons. Otherwise, they'll be like, well, that's a nice argument, congratulations, but it's not practical, and so they'll demur.
Is this something you really want to leave to the policymakers to decide?
No, but we need to get on it, right? Because people are doing it. Highly paid attorneys for the copyright owner industry, for the media industries, are on it.
Yes, I know.
Not, So I hope you enjoy that one. I think your point is quite correct, that this is the vectorization changes what that thing is.
Yeah. Well, the transformational change is one of the arguments for allowing fair use.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still case law has not been migrated into the actual copyright law itself, I don't believe.
Right. Yeah. So a transformative, if something is found to be transformative, any use, therefore, the use of the original content, you made copies, you performed it on, it doesn't matter, it was fair, because at the other end, you produce something unique. But I also wanted to point out, if the courts that found for the rationale behind vectorization of content into data also forgot to cycle back to the market. So in other words, what if I take a corpus of music and I design and I transfer learn something and the thing makes music, right? And then I take that music and sell it back in the same market in which I drew the music from. That was never addressed in the findings of the court. That's a can of worms waiting to be open, and it will be.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be.
That will be open.
You have your hand up. Go for it.
I think it was first, so I can go after.
Oh, he's over there. Okay.
I'm able to now speak.
So to the first point, I'm looking forward to reading that article as soon as I'm in front of a machine. To the second point, there's another analogy with RAM. You remember in the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a copy made in RAM, but it was a transitory copy. It was there and then it's gone. Similar with vectorization, right? You've vectorized the music and then you jettison the expression, right? All that's left is residual ideas. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. That's a second analogy of why this is not a copy of the original. And to the third point about essentially a snake eating its own tail, where the machine is going to eat more of the machine's output, which is going to eat more of the machine's output. That is something that, yeah, I worry about millions and trillions of monkeys typing Shakespeare, right? And then we just output just merely mush. But yeah, that's another reason why the output should not be copyrightable.
Okay. That's an interesting thought. Okay, next, I guess.
Yeah, so I had an idea during the first talk, and he was mentioning this also a question of authorship and how do we manage this and grant this. So I was thinking maybe about clearly or pointing out very kind of in a clear manner that artificial intelligence technology is present. And I think it's also easier in terms of legal reinforcement. So in this sense, we may not, deal on who is the author, whether AI is the author, but we can make it clear that it has participated. Another further step could be, we could mention what the percentage that artificial intelligence contribute. It may also not be as accurate, like 67.5 or something, but it could be like 60 to 70, 30 to 40, something like that. So this is the idea I had, that we should not hide the fact that technology as artificial intelligence participated, but show it. And I think, again, it's maybe easier to legally reinforce, since it doesn't require us to deal what is AI and should we give it authorship? Well, we can consider it from a more technical point of view and say, yes, it is just a technology, maybe at present, and we just need to show it has taken part, because it also influences our judgment of the work. So how do we perceive the work? Especially, why percentage is important? If artificial intelligence creates 90% and human input is 10, we may question, what is the input? Of course, it may be significant because guidance, management is also a work, and sometimes very, very significant, which creates actually the flow. So yes, this is the idea I got during the talk. And yes, I think I had another point. Also mentioned about the circularity that AI keeps feeding on machine. Indeed, I think this is where the significant human element comes into play, that we need actually create ideas, more like human ideas, because of course, big part of our history and knowledge is combining knowledge, previous knowledge into new one, and then into new one. So this kind of mixing and matching, but there's also something creation of new, which machine may not able to do. Of course, it takes time to explore what it can, what it cannot, what we can, what we cannot. So also, it may not should be seen as competition with machine, but we should maybe work together toward a common goal. Whether human or machine achieves it first, we set it higher than. So this is one of the things that we have in Western culture, the narrative of competition of technology and human, which also can be seen in the times like Kantian philosophy, and also transcendence, which also goes back to Plato. So going beyond human self, but it's a little bit different, but still interconnected. That yes, this kind of difference again, what makes us human. But back to the topic, more concrete and present, because it's all about human nature as well. But yeah, so awareness, pointing it out, percentage at best. And not at best, just saying it has taken place, and we should show it. And yes, of course, it may all seem very confusing and difficult as far as implementing ethics. It's very important, but we should not give up. This is why we're here. This is why we're working on this and thinking. So we should not give up when it seems challenging, because through this challenge, we will achieve something great.
Well, I think we have an opportunity to make a very large difference in how this shift of technology is going to impact everything else. And my concern is that right now, the drive is to bigger and greater profits for larger organizations and increasing the cost of existence for people who are in the middle and lower range of things. And maybe that's not the ideal thing to do. And so I think we need to examine what is possible, because we have this. Well, I think the GPT chat is really, it's magical. It's also wrong sometimes. I mean, because it works on the semiotics of the internal data that's been stored, and not upon any understanding of what's really happening. And that may be the real difference between AIs and humans for quite a while. But if you can't tell the difference between an AI and a human by asking it questions, it's sort of hard to say that they're very different. You know, we're experimentalists in the way we deal with the universe. And so we need to work at it. Go ahead.
I believe that Turing test is still valid. So it can be seen, as you mentioned, that we can distinguish, not as test for existing, that it is real, but as an evaluative test, that it is good technology. If it can replicate it so well, it means it's very good. So it would be more on an assessment, evaluative side, rather than saying that it actually has something. Of course, it may have. But as, for example, John Searle pointed out, creating consciousness takes something more than just syntax, which you mentioned, shuffling also, this idea is that it doesn't have understanding, which is semantics, attaching mental content. So yes, it can be very powerful, as I mentioned before, and it's more can be to the side of assessment again. So yes, I think this is pretty much it.
Okay. Good.
I wanted to send a link for. So I mentioned that Paul, my buddy Paul, is working for Getty Images, and he's in Europe trying to get some sort of regulation. And I'm going to send this link up. So a lot of the Getty Images are not. The Getty folks are now having models sign consent forms that their biometrics, their images may be used for biometric or AI training, right? So this is like, but that's an extension of the moral person, right? Because, well, wait a minute, right? So it's very clear that agencies advocating for this sort of control, they are going to leverage that argument. You might want to review some of their position papers, because it might give you some ammunition for your argument, right? To create a much more well, I guess not to argue for artificial intelligence personhood, but rather that well, I guess that people that there is some form of extension of the moral rights, and that is enough to give artificial intelligence put some sort of regulatory fence around it. In the way copyright may not be the best regulatory fence, it has chilling effects. And
well, there are people who've been arguing that we should have a different category of intellectual property, which is that created by AIs.
Or make the artificial intelligence a public utility, kind of like telephone lines and electricity.
Well, yeah, though our experience with telephone companies and power companies has not been all that great.
It took a few decades to get a hand of that.
I wonder though, I mean, we're talking kind of quasi personhood for machines, but at this point they're all tools, right? This is a tool that when I created my 417 billion melodies, I hit a button and then it output, right? So it is not an agent of me. It is merely a tool, much like a word processor is a tool. So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves to say that it's fully autonomous, because it's not. So I think that's thing number one. Thing number two is that we have kind of quasi autonomous bots already. If this happens, then that do this, right? So that is, if the stock price dips below this, then sell my thing, right? Is there autonomy there? Well, no. I mean, it's still a tool, right? But it seems autonomous because it's doing it by itself. So anyway, mostly I'm thinking this idea of providing personhood for the machine. I think that's putting going over our skis a bit, and I don't think we're quite there yet. The second thing maybe for somebody else was talking about, to what extent is there human additions to the machine created works? And so I would say that that's really tricky, because you can go to boomy.com and say, I want an electronic dance music that's 120 beats per minute, and it outputs a fully realized song. That, under my proposition, is fully machine created, therefore uncopyrightable. If I change one quarter note, does that make it copyrightable? Same thing with ChatGPT, right? If I change one letter, or if I change a punctuation mark, right, is that now copyrightable? And putting a threshold on human contribution to a machine created work, I think that's folly.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's criminal. That's a different matter.
Well, I mean, our feelings on it are notwithstanding. I mean, I hear you. And the way that things are going, those are irrelevant. How we feel about it is irrelevant. The copyright owners are going to want humans to have a lot of input before they can have the copyright, but people using AI to be creative or to have stuff done quicker, maybe get a story started, want minimal, like, a space, something. And which brings me to an analog. If you're fans of literature, Tom Wolfe wrote You Can Never Go Home Again, but his relationship with his editor was quite intimate. They were quite good friends, and his editor did a lot of work to shape Wolf's, so to show the final product, right? So should his editor have been a co-creator of that? We just put the editor was there. We don't realize how much creative work actually editors do, good editors. So the analog in our life is that the amanuensis, or someone who works a lot, doesn't, if you were the first to get the ideas on paper, or even put a dot in, anything that's subsequent is someone helping you, but you're the original, right? So I think the analog in real life in between humans exists, and it's just an extension of that with AI.
That's right. And if Tom Wolfe didn't disclose that editor, the Copyright Office would never know that was.
And that's the other question is, right? And so I asked my attorney friends. I said, so we're going to get subpoenas to look into people's hard drives to see if their training corpora had copyrighted works. They're going to hit delete. Right, or they're gonna fry it's gonna vanish.
Right. Well, the thing is that the copyrighted works that are used in some sort of information knowledge base that's used to drive things like ChatGPT is a reduction. It's been decomposed into pieces that are very small and mixed with other pieces, and structure discovered amongst that, and it's not at all clear that there's much of the actual original copyrighted material there.
I 100% agree. And I would also say that if I went to booby.com, exported a thing, and then filed it with the Copyright Office, they would not know that it was machine created, right? The reason that Thaler, in the Thaler lawsuit, got dinged is because Thaler said, the machine created it. If I don't disclose that, they're not going to know. So number one,
no legal obligations. You're right. There are no legal obligations to disclose.
That's right. So number one is the Copyright Office going to ask, hey, is there any amount of machine creatable portion of this? That's maybe one way out of this. The other thing too is that if I file with the Copyright Office, they don't ask. I get a presumption of copyright on the thing that I've just created. If I sue somebody over that thing, then they don't know that was machine created, right? And so am I going to be required to disclose, maybe in a deposition, that what percentage of this was machine created, therefore uncopyrightable? Anyway,
you may not be able to tell that.
I mean, I could lie, right?
No, you may not know. I mean,
right. Yes, sure.
What percentage is that? Comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I might try maybe to address it from the last. So the question also of editors, how much actually one person may put into work their knowledge and their skills, while the other one is praised. So this is common even among humans. And it's part of the research integrity or just a general publishing integrity that you should also make authors in right order if it's scientific paper, and like that you should actually assign, otherwise it is a fraud or a misrepresentation, which is also not good. And yeah, another question that was before is that we already kind of currently agreed, I think it is also more widely agreed, that it is the technology. It is technology, it is not a person, artificial intelligence, so as pointed out, and it is not fully autonomous, indeed. Yet the consequences that artificial intelligence already do has ethical implications on humans, on us. For example, self-driving cars. So of course, here is a topic more of the copyrights, but it's also important on this more simple example, how ethical ideas actually can be significant also in copyrights, because it may be more intricate, but ethical ideas are very important in artificial intelligence, how it's built and how it operates. Because as I mentioned, it collects data and uses this data. So how it will be used, because also it's important to think of artificial intelligence not only as author, it also present in governmental systems. For example, Compass, artificial intelligence algorithm that helps in courts to convict or either make certain decision for the court. So it is also not only about authorship, it's also about the court system and how it is embedded in the government, which also I think important thing. So yes, another thing was mentioned about limiting AI data, how it feeds on it. So of course, model release forms is very popular thing, which means that model may not give consent and their photos were used. This is very popular also not before artificial intelligence, and still is reinforced by artificial intelligence. So one idea that I also had is that maybe we could put certain limits how AI feeds on the data, because in art, it's very big issue in terms of copyrights and ownership when AI copies styles of artists. And these artists lose their income because people, they can just order from artificial intelligence for much lower price in any way they want, and then they have to pay artists, while machine feed on artist style. So I think it's a fraud, but I don't know how to solve it yet. But yeah, so maybe there could be limits how it feeds on data. So either say that collaboration with artists, so we use your style, we give you some fee for this, so you have this system of payment and the contract, which is I find very favorable. But it's also important to understand when AI feeds on someone's style and when not. So
it's hard to define styles.
Yes, and
for example, there's a provision in the copyright law that says you cannot copyright a font. And the reason you can't copyright a font is that it's not possible in any reasonable technology to compare one font to another.
Indeed, it is so. But certain also artistic styles, they're so recognizable, like Picasso, for example.
Yes.
Of course. It may be a little bit more free in terms of Picasso, but there are modern artists who actually experience this because their style is so distinct. Like there was not Brazilian, Spanish artist who has such also abstract type of style, and artificial intelligence, it became really popular. Many people tried to recreate it. So this is more modern context, so how it copies the styles. Yeah.
But I wonder though, the style, if I as a human sound like Bob Dylan, So I sing in the style of Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan can't sue me for copyright infringement because that's how many singers sound like Bob Dylan, right? How many people look like painted like Matisse, right? So the style of somebody is not copyrightable. So similarly, if a machine copies the style of something, is that copyrightable? And I'd argue no, right? Because it is the idea of Matisse, it is the idea of Picasso, it is the idea of Bob Dylan. And again, ideas are not copyrightable, only the expressions of those ideas. So as long as I'm not copying the expression of Bob Dylan, as long as I'm not copying the expression of Matisse, the expression of Picasso, there's no copyright infringement. So can you really copy the idea?
You think that Bob Dylan's singing style is not copyrightable?
I think it's not.
I think.
Well, but how many singers sound like Bob Dylan? Lots of them. Right?
Billy Joel. If you're a fan of Billy Joel and you're a fan of Bob Dylan, and you know, Piano Man, sing us a song, you're a piano man, and then hey, Mr. Tambourine. I mean, seriously. And then I've been to a Billy Joel event where you sit and ask questions with the guy, and I asked him, so what's the deal with Piano Man? He's like, I love Bob Dylan. From his right. So I mean, but we don't hold artists accountable for these sorts of what otherwise would be right, but we're trying to hold AI accountable for these sorts of transgressions. They're not really. They're just the way we do things. I think what happens is human people see that a machine is doing exactly what we did, but in a computational way, and then we feel a lot less special about ourselves. And so our knee-jerk response is to sort of go after, find some element of our uniqueness. But the fact is, it's just not.
That's right.
It's a variance.
And I would also say that there's a trademark law, right? So if I were to pass something off as Bob Dylan or pass something off as Billy Joel, that would be trademark. So there's a bunch of cases where there's Vanna White said that you have a robot that looks like me. There's Tom Waits said you sound like me. So there's the trademark aspect of it. But the machine is not doing that. If I use ChatGPT, say, right in the style of Tom Wolfe, and then I put it out as something that is Tom Wolfe-like, that might be a trademark infringement, but that would not be a copyright infringement.
Okay.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think there is case law. I can't put my finger on it immediately, where the expression, the style of writing is in fact what got copyrighted, and the story content was nothing. The problem is, at least in my opinion, the copyright law does not really differentiate things properly in a way that you can actually apply it. The same thing is true of patent law in some ways as well. It's very, very difficult to write a patent that is bulletproof and doesn't somehow have prior art out there that will kill it. It's hard, and we chose to maintain patterns of protection which go back 100 years, 200 years, and more. And it's very difficult to have anticipated 200 years ago the conflicts that we have trying to figure out whether ChatGPT is going to be able to make output which is copyright or not. And in terms of what we're doing today, I don't remember the exact number, but I think about half of Forbes magazine is generated by a computer from financial data without the interference of any human being. There's a guy that built a system that looked a lot like GPT some years ago. He was a professor at Northwestern, and started a little company and immediately got all of the major financial and sports magazines on his customer list. And you haven't heard of him at all, but he puts out lots of magazine stuff.
That goes to you cannot copyright facts as well. So if a machine is merely taking financial data, facts, and then just expressing those facts, that is not copyrightable. There's nothing creative or original about expression of facts. But
then it had a knob in the UI that allowed you to choose the financial commenter style was you wanted to use for each particular article. And so it's gotta have some knowledge of what that expression is in some sense, because it makes it something that's recognizable by humans. And I suppose that also recognizable by a machine as a result. Well, we're coming up to 5:30, and I gotta say, I think I really like this. Could you say the last thing here? And then if everybody who talked would send me their email address, I'd really appreciate that.
Oh, okay, thank you. So yeah, so because it may be hard to understand maybe the copyright and authorship concept, this is why I thought the awareness is much easier, and at the same time it has similar impact to the authorship and the copyright notions, so that we kind of show that in this article AI participated, because of course data, why artificial intelligence is so powerful and good, because it can process much more data than a human can. So it can feed on so many different types of information, and we make sense of it, or the AI may pre-make sense of it, and then we kind of, at best, it would be very favorable if we control this process and say, yes, this is correct conclusion, this is maybe not. So this is why the awareness. So for example, in the articles, we can point maybe not even percentage, that would be maybe too good, though can also raise questions that, yeah, you did 30% as a human, but this 30% can have a big impact. So yes, back to the awareness, and it may be a good solution as I see it also, because we don't have to really go deeper into what AI actually is, but at the same time, it has similar impact as the authorship dispute.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, does anybody want to say the very, very last word? Anyhow, thank you very much. It was really, I think this is a successful experiment. I was really pleased that we ended up having a nice collection of comments, and I think we actually moved the ball forward. So I thank you very much and for your participation, and call it good evening. Thank you. See you next week, maybe.